what's up, everybody? It is Don and I'm back for another episode of Unapologetically. If you are tuning in for the first time, thank you so much. Thank you for coming to the channel. If you are a returning viewer, thank you also. Because of you, that is the reason why I do these videos. So please like, share, and subscribe to everybody that's on the channel right now. As it relates to this, I am going to be doing Dahmer episodes 2 through 10. So if you saw previously, if you haven't, I did episode 1. This is going to be a combination of 2 through 10 to talk about Dahmer. I'm not going to be too long-winded, y'all, so I'm going to really hit just facts. And if it's some stuff I missed, I'm sorry. I may come back and do a kind of a recap afterwards. So I am going to say that this movie definitely has a lot of parts that make you very angry. It has a lot of parts that make you question a lot of things that are happening in the world or that happened in the world. So when we get to episode 2, they're starting off with Niecy Nash, who's Glenda Cleveland, talking about like, well, how many were there? And we're at the point where they have, at that point, caught Jeffrey Dahmer. But we start to get these flashbacks of different people in Jeffrey Dahmer's life. One of the first things is we're able to see Jeffrey Dahmer as a kid, and we see that his mother has some struggles of her own with her own mental health and possibly with postpartum depression and substance abuse and some things. So we get a little bit of insight into his family dynamic as it relates to that. We also get some insight into the father who did not know how to really father. And I'm going to say a lot of times fathers know how to provide, but a lot of times they don't know how to make that emotional connection. So when you see this, you see there's a distance between the father and the mother, and the father doesn't know how to connect with his son, who is a little peculiar, you know? And so the father is trying to figure out this whole dynamic of doing it all. Jeffrey is growing up in this house that is dysfunctional. Let's just call it what it is. It's dysfunctional. And they are trying to figure out how to navigate all of that. The father doesn't do a good job of really trying to hone in on that. And I'll just call it what it is. He does not do a great job of that. He doesn't do a great job of getting to the root of things and actually facing his issues face forward either. And so it causes some things later on in life. But as you see this young man who never was really intelligent in school, who was always a little peculiar, who was always picked on, who's the mother, doesn't really understand him. The father doesn't understand him. And the father starts to try to show him things that he would think intrigues him, because Jeffrey found an interest in animals and nature and all of this. He gave the teacher some tadpoles as a present. But he also likes this thing with roadkill. And the father is honing in on this thing of, oh, my child is interested in dissecting these animals and these roadkill things, so let me do this, which to some people is a little peculiar. It's one thing if I buy you some animals and you dissect them, but we're going out and finding roadkill. Roadkill? Sir. Now, sir, you're going to get your child roadkill for them to play around with, and you don't think that that is going to stimulate some feelings that you probably shouldn't stimulate in your child during their formative years. Sir, come on now. So even the mother is like, nah, that ain't normal. That's not normal. But Jeffrey was always looking for somebody to connect with, but he was always, like I said, a little different, is what you see. And so, you get to the later part of life and he's not connecting, but he's also not been successful in most of the places in his life. He graduated high school barely. The father and them kind of leave him after a certain point, and he's there by himself because the mom leaves with the other brother and is like, you can stay here. You don't really want me anyway. I'm going to come back in a little bit, but I got to get my mind together. So they leave him to fend for himself, and he becomes, an alcoholic at that point. He is barely passing high school. And so when the father does come back, you have this misguided man who, at that point, he is he's already become who he is. And he's an alcoholic, but the father is trying to find the best in him. So he pays for him to go to college. Jeffrey has a 0.4 GPA out of a 4.0. Yo, if you got a 4 GPA, that means Jeffrey was not even writing his name on papers. You hear me? He was not going to class or writing his name on papers, 4.4. So the dad is like, well, go to the army. Jeffrey get kicked out of the army for some stuff that's kind of weird. You know what I'm saying? So he's always not been it, you know? He's just not at all been good. So he comes back home, you know, like the father's like, look, you're going to move in, you're like with your grandmother. And the grandmother seems to try to find out who Jeffrey Dahmer is. Like, meaning she tries to love on him, you know, and do those things. She's very religious, but you can tell she doesn't understand him. And even in this household, you can tell that Jeffrey possibly being gay is something that nobody in the family wants to admit. It is, you know, the 70s, 80s, you know, they don't want to admit this, that he's, so I think that causes its own things. Jeffrey has a slew of different jobs, from working at a meat shop. He cutting up meat, y'all, at the meat shop. A phlebotomist. He drawing people blood. But he also takes the blood. Like, the blood he took it from the bank. And it's like playing with it at home. Possibly tasting it. Crazy. You know, so those two jobs were the main jobs that I recall off the top of my head. But he's had a few jobs, and he's not been successful at those jobs. Like, he was consistent at the meat shop, but even at the meat shop, they end up firing Jeffrey because he goes to a state fair and I guess is drunk, and he either naked at the fair or does something indecent. And, you know, what I researched and found out is that he had gotten in trouble at the state fair, true, but he also had gotten in trouble for like indecent exposure with trying to do something sexually where kids could see him. The crazy part about that is when he goes to court, like, he was kind of getting slapped on the wrist at all these times. The wrist. But, you know, he has a lot of things going on. The family is trying to support him in it. And he continues to pick up this peculiarness and this affinity to guys that it's the unhealthy affinity to guys. Like, he may have, you know, sexual affinity, but he starts to have this unhealthy affinity towards guys staying with his grandmother. So he is, you know, yeah, it's kind of interesting. What we do see in the flashback is before he went to stay with his grandmother, Jeffrey was staying at his father's house and he killed a hitchhiker. Like, he told the man he was going to take him somewhere. The man is like, are you going to take me? He tries to get him drunk. The man is going to leave. Jeffrey bludgeons him with a dumbbell. That was his first killing. So then he tried to hold off on killing for a while. Once he gets with his grandmother's house, he pauses it for a second, but then he resumes this killing of guys. A lot of the victims that Jeffrey Dahmer killed were boys, 14 or so, and grown men. Many of them were black and brown. Some of them were not. I don't think that we truly ever know. You can tell me, I don't think that Jeffrey Dahmer realized all of the victims that he had. Because even if you recall in the movie, later on, there's a victim that lives in the building named Dean Vaughn, who is not considered one of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims, but he was killed and found in his home the same way that Jeffrey Dahmer, and he stayed in the apartment building as Jeffrey Dahmer. And everybody says they didn't want to pin that murder on him, but he was found with his pants around his waist in his bed. Like, he was killed by Jeffrey Dahmer, allegedly. No, the man's dead. He was killed by Jeffrey Dahmer. Let's call a spade a spade. There's no way in the same building you're going to have a serial killer and then somebody's going to be killed similarly in that same building, and it's not connected to the serial killer, and it's the time that the serial killer is staying there, and it's a black man who, you know, knew Jeffrey. That don't even make no sense. So I don't even know where they're trying to put that narrative out at, or why anybody felt like that they could not connect those two dots. But either way. So yeah, Jeffrey has this affinity, so he starts, you know, hanging out with guys, and when he would hang out with the guys, you know, he would try to get them to drink, and, you know, Jeffrey had started killing people, you know, like people he would meet at the clubs, or people he would meet at bars, or people he would get to drink with them, or people, you know, he had started killing these guys. He started going to bathhouses And at the bathhouses, he would drug them. He drugged a couple people. And the bathhouses people finally were like, yeah, you can't come up in here. Because people would disappear. He killed someone. He ended up going to a hotel, rented a hotel, gets drunk or high, kills the man, does not remember killing him, wakes up and the man is dead, so he has to dispose of him. So he starts to take all these things back to his grandmother's house. The smells even start at his grandmother's house. If you watched episode 1, we're talking about these smells that he had at his apartment. They start at his grandmother's house. Everybody is smelling this. Nobody is realizing this is dead bodies. Why are we walking around and we are letting this smell protrude, and we are letting him lie to us and say that it is animals or something for years? That is the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life. There is no way I'm going to be like, my son, it smell up in here. He already a little peculiar, but it's a road. It's a rodent outside, or it's something I tried downstairs, or there's no way you're going to be in my house that long. Or I'm not, like, there's no way. They said at one point his dad comes because his grandma's like, the smell is just too intense. There is no way I'm not going to know something is going on. I am sorry, and it is probably easier said, but I don't blame them, but there's just no way. There's no way in hell. So again, Jeffrey is going through all of this stuff. He even at one point steals a mannequin. His grandma finds it. It's like, no, you ain't finna do this in my house. You and your victims, y'all are here. You're bringing these people back and forth, these boys late at night. At one point, he brings somebody back. He tried to drug him, and the dude passes out, and the grandmother comes down, and she is not going to leave the man downstairs with Jeffrey. She is like, no, I'm not leaving him down here with you. He is sick. He needs help. I'm gonna stay down here with him. That saves that man's life. That is a true thing. I looked it up. The man is still alive. That saves his life. Even though the grandmother, you can tell, she was from a different time. She's like, I didn't know you had black friends. Baby, he been eating black booty. He been killing black people. What are you talking about? He has an offense. That's all he really likes. They do depict it that Jeffrey is more like, it's not the 20s. What are you talking about, lady? He wasn't racist. Obviously, because he had an affinity and liked black men or something. But yeah, that was, it was very interesting that man's life was saved because of the grandmother, or else he would have been another one of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims. We continue on. Jeffrey is pushed to leave and get his own apartment. They're trying to push him to be responsible, all of these kind of things. He at one point kidnaps a young man. The young man escapes, and Jeffrey is charged with this. When he is charged, the privilege of being a Caucasian American in those times, because you have to remember, this is the 80s, 90s. You gotta look back at even when the year that Rodney King was beat down, certain things still had a racial divide. Jeffrey was put on probation. That young man went to the police, and Jeffrey was put on probation. They said that Jeffrey's life, he can have his life ruined because of that. That's how bad it is. And so, later on, Jeffrey moves out, gets into the apartment, and one of Jeffrey's main victims is the brother, and he does not know it, of that boy that got away. This victim, oh God, it just sends chills right now. It sends chills thinking about it. This victim was failed by the Wisconsin Police Department. This victim was definitely failed. He is a 14-year-old boy that Jeffrey buys beer for, that Jeffrey, has at his home. That is the victim that escaped. And Jeffrey Dahmer convinced the police that was his 19-year-old boyfriend. The boy was out of his mind, naked, and they sent him back inside. It is two parts to this. The dumbass police officers who didn't even try to see how old that this boy was because he was a brown boy. The dumbass police officers that if somebody is calling you a few times saying something is not right with this kid and you find him naked outside, what? The dumbass police officers, because it was two men, that they didn't want to push this any further. They were boyfriends. And then even when they leave the scene of the crime, they're talking about, oh my God, I need to get douched down because I went in there. They let that boy go back into that house. That boy was later killed by a procedure that Jeffrey injects something in his brain. He was alive. They let that boy go back in the house. They failed. Wisconsin, you failed. You failed. And I had to look it up because I knew that that family had to have a wrongful death suit. And the fact that they didn't get all the money that they should have got for that, that's some bull. Because that little boy could be alive today if you guys would have actually did your job. The fact that the police officers that did it were only suspended for like 60 days and then the union got them back in, that is a problem. Everybody else after that little boy, you literally should be suing and should have won. I can't believe that they were throwing out cases because you should have won the case. The fact that those police officers in that district and that mayor and that police chief did not, like, the city should have been paying all of you multi-millions of dollars because after that 14-year-old boy, everybody else that was killed, they did not do their job of protecting and serving. And that was some negligence. That was negligence, bro. There is no way around that. He has some victims after that were all like, oh my God. Tony Hughes, the deaf and mute guy, is conflicting events on, info on how well they knew each other. They may have knew each other, but I don't think it was a relationship, but they were cool. He had met him a few times and I guess he had started working with them and maybe Jeffrey was, saying he was going to take pictures with him, but Tony, I guess, was friendly with Jeff. I am not going to go on the idea that they had a romantic relationship, but they were friendly. Tony ends up being murdered by Jeffrey. He's deaf and mute and his body laid in Jeffrey's room for like 3 days. Around the same time that after the young man, I think it was Oliver Lacey. It was a few more victims that happened after the young man ran out of the house, escaped, and was put back into the house. And some of them that they highlight, again, such as Tony Hughes, such as the 14-year-old boy, Errol Lindsay, his sister is the one that you see, and they show that footage that is all over the news of her showing that she wants to kill Jeffrey Dahmer because of what he did. All of those things and all of those people should have gotten millions from the city of Wisconsin. Like millions. Like literally, they should have gotten millions. It wouldn't have brought their kid back, but it was some injustice. The fact that they didn't, like some lawsuits, I think Oliver Lacey, I think some of their lawsuits, they did get some money. I think that the young man, I don't want to mess up Luke, they may have called him, the 14-year-old. I think his family should have got multi-million dollars. Like they should have got tons of millions of dollars from the city. I think that Tony's family, I think that all of the families deserve something. All of the families. It was hard to look at that part and see how they were failed and see how it became a thing of no one cared what was happening. The police, no one seemed to really take it serious. And I think Glenda Cleveland, they tried to show on how much she was very adamant. Some things are different about this story. Just to talk about some of those things. So Glenda Cleveland did not stay directly next door to Jeffrey Dahmer. She stayed in the building beside, but she did call the police a few times because some people did find the little boy outside. That is a true fact. The young man that got away from his grandmother's house is a true person, and he did survive and get out of the house. The young man who was on the stand who ends up, when they arrested Jeffrey, that gets away. It is conflicting info. So part of it says his trial, and I watched the real video. He says that he met Jeffrey out and he was gonna pose, and he possibly was gonna pose to, have some photos taken of Jeffrey. They say in certain parts and documents that he met at a gay bar. He doesn't say that. He says he's not gay on the stand. It's conflicting things. When you look at even his life was very different after that. He got into a lot of trouble. I think there may have been some, substance abuse issues. He went to jail for murdering somebody later, as a homeless person. He threw somebody over a bridge or something. That man's life was never the same. And I wonder if we could have helped him in some way by providing counseling or providing something for this man. The people who lived in that house, in that apartment complex, they were, the apartment complex was kicked, tore down, and They were supposed to do a memorial. It never happened even today. But did we provide some kind of support for them? Those families of those victims that were bludgeoned and they dealt with this, and you didn't do anything financially for them, or did you do anything to support them afterwards as far as mental health, counseling, or any of those kind of things? I think that there was a lot of things that did not happen for these victims. And we did an injustice, and I mean, we as people and American people, an injustice was done to a lot of them, and specifically, I think because they were Black and brown people. That's just my thoughts. I think with a lot of the facts, they tried to, stay and, they tried to go as close to fact with some of these. I'm not gonna lie, some of these happened within days of each other. Like the 14-year-old, within 3 days, somebody else was dead. These things, I looked it up. There were a series of things where once Jeffrey started talking, he kind of tried to tell them about all his victims. He never accounted for all of them. They like to make it think that he accounted for all of them. I don't think he did, because again, I think that the young man that even stayed in the building. Jeffrey in prison, there were people with fans that were in prison that were sending Jeffrey money. There were people that tried to take, the families did try to sue to get all of that. His father did write a book. His father did try to figure out, was it his problem, and kind of was there for his son. And that's a whole lot to unpack at that moment, because the father definitely did not help at all. And so I understand some of his guilt, for sure. He should have it. The mother should have it. Like everybody around probably should have some form of guilt, but it wasn't them that completed the actions. Jeffrey is sentenced to 900 years in prison. Part of the movie is incorrect on the accounts that I've read. The person who killed Jeffrey Dahmer says that was the first time he had met Jeffrey Dahmer. Other accounts says that he knew, and because Jeffrey killed Black people, and because the other guy that he killed, they were in a gym room cleaning up, and they happened to be alone. I don't know how they leave 3 murderers alone in one gym. And he kills the guy who killed his wife and who tried to blame it on Black men. So they say that's the motive in those cases. With other things that I read, the man didn't know. He did not know Jeffrey like that. They show that he researches him up. They said he didn't know him. He bludgeoned Jeffrey, and Jeffrey died about an hour later. The other victim died a couple days later. And so he kills those. And Jeffrey Dahmer, after 2 years in prison, 1 attempt at his life being taken, he was murdered in prison in like 1994. And I think that this movie definitely, kudos to Evan Rogers, I think, or Evan Roberts. I'm sorry if I mess up the name. Kudos to Niecy Nash. Kudos to the actors in this movie and their depiction of the stories. I think it definitely makes us think a lot about the times at that point, a lot about things and serial killers and the practices that the justice system didn't have as it relates to people, especially with, people of color and crimes against them at that point. Overall, I think it was, a tough movie to swallow. It was pretty deep. It was pretty hard. And you may want to talk to somebody after you watch it. It was pretty deep for anybody to watch. And so I, want to say, again, Ryan Murphy, all of the actors, amazing job. If you have time and you would like to watch a movie and kind of dissect some stuff, I'm a person that watches and then goes back and like dissects, sees what's real, sees what's not real. But it made me mad as hell. The movie made me mad. It made me furious. It made me angry. It made me a lot of things. And I was so hurt for those families. Like, I was seriously hurt for those families that this could have not happened to if, certain events wouldn't have happened. If we would have, stopped Jeffrey earlier when he, messed with the one kid, it may have stopped 10 more victims from being murdered. Stop Jeffrey when the one kid, is walking out there naked, the brother of the kid that he already had the charges against. I just think that it was definitely a lot of things that could have saved a lot of lives. But that is my review of Dahmer, episodes 2 through 10 of the Netflix series. And kudos, an amazing job. Please like, share, subscribe. Please comment below your thoughts on this video. Let me know some of your thoughts, because I definitely had questions. I had a lot of questions on things that, it made me research it myself. And so hopefully this commentary helps you if you decide to watch it. It does have some spoilers, but hopefully it helps you along the way with your decision. And again, I'm here to talk to you unapologetically. So my views may not be your views, but we're all here to talk and be respectful of that. Comment below. I try to reply back to you all. Again, if you would like to purchase merch, you can purchase it at thenewmeaning.com. Don Juan NC on all social media. And thank you so much for watching Unapologetically.